Hey, everybody. I am joining Isaac today. I am replacing Nick for the day, who is unable to attend. I was joking that it was because of game 7 against the Heat, but I digress. Isaac, I couldn't be more excited to have you on today. And for everyone that's watching, we're going to be talking about probably one of the most important and efficient, efficient growth is the name of the game, things in that Isaac has grown 3 companies without relying on paid marketing or extensive automation. So we're going to dive into those details, just how you did that, and like the organic growth playbook. I'm pretty hype and appreciative. Like what you've done is really outstanding, and especially in times like today where budgets are getting sliced. But even if they weren't, it's just so effective, right?
And one of the things that has going for it is it's really fun. It's a lot more fun. And I'm a big fan of, like, if you're gonna do stuff, you're gonna work. If you can enjoy it, it makes it a lot better. It makes it a lot easier. I would love to know in the chat what kind of, I saw a couple different people looking at some profiles as I was popping in. What kind of company do you work for? So I'm assuming that this is mostly B2B SaaS, but I'd love to know just quickly. Anybody wants to pop it in the chat, and then that will kind of help me as I'm going, because I'm really curious about what kind of people are here on this Marketing Monday. And then there we go, B2B SaaS Series
A.
Okay, that's kind of what I like assume. It's like Series A to like Series B or C is like what I would guess. B2B SaaS. Okay. Anybody who's not B2B SaaS, I'd love to see. Jared, when you guys asked me to come on here, I was like, man, what should we really talk about? What should we get into? And I always want to make sure that because usually I play host a lot. And when you're the host, you don't have to know anything. Like, you can just be an idiot that asks questions. I'm not implying that you are. Okay. I'm talking about my own hosting.
Idiot now.
Yeah, hosts are idiots. No, I'm usually a host, and I love it because I get to learn, I get to ask questions, but I don't have to like be the expert. So I was like, okay, if I'm here talking on, Marketing Mondays, what do I want to talk about where I feel like I actually maybe have figured a few things out? And there's a lot of stuff that I have not figured out and I'm very new to. But what I've recognized over the last 10 years of my career is everywhere I've succeeded, I kind of figure out retrospectively, looking backwards, that it was for just a couple reasons, a couple principles, and a couple tactics that I want to get into. But all of it starts with this idea of a shift in the way that buyers buy. And in the digital world, which we've been fully in the digital world for 20 years now, let's say, I would say it's really like in the last 5 and accelerated in the last 2 or 3, a shift from the how economy to the who economy. And that's kind of like the main insight at the highest level that I think all of these different things flow from. And the early, the digital age starts with the how economy. Now information is freely available to everyone, or almost free. There's like this, ability to publish information, access information. So asking how just got so much easier. The barriers to figuring out questions, how do I do this? How do I solve that? Those barriers were exploded. So what did this mean for businesses in the digital world? Whoever answered how questions the most effectively tended to win. So where you rank on Google, right? So like paid ads, SEM, SEO, comparison sites, your product specs compared to your competitors' product specs, right? Your downloadable, all your inbound strategies of downloadable content and educating customers, your outbound strategies, because inboxes still weren't noisy enough. I mean, I know outbound still works now as well, but like the effectiveness was much greater when you could come right in and say, here's how you do X. Fast forward to today, and in the last couple of years, buyers are not asking how very much anymore because there's just too many answers. When you ask how, like, I don't know about you, everybody here, but Google has just declined in value to me like every month for the last couple of years. There's just too much stuff. Everything's gamed. Like anywhere where you go get answers to how questions, it's harder and harder to find what you need. And there's just too much. You don't have enough time to sort through it. So people have switched to asking who. It's almost like a return to like the pre-digital world. It was more about who, right? And the digital world allowed us to blow off the gatekeepers of, who is the only way to figure things out and get answers. Now we kind of have this really interesting hybrid where you have the sort of democratization of information that the digital world brought. But because there's so much of it, I call it the infocalypse. There's just too much information. People are now asking who again. So who has solved this problem before? Who that I trust can I go ask about this? Who's knowledgeable? And you look at buyer behavior, and it very much lines up with this. The way that buyers buy, all the steps along the process are influenced by podcasts, friends on social media, colleagues, word of mouth, right? And that doesn't show up in the attribution software. I know Chris Walker at Refine Labs is always hammering on that, right? That like the attribution is not lining up with the reality. And that's very true, but it's because people are looking to who more than ever. So that's kind of to set the stage. That's where we are. And that's kind of like what I'm doing now in the B2B space. But how I got here is a very unlikely journey. So that's kind of, I would love to sort of walk through some of the things I've done with some previous companies that were not even in B2B and what I learned from that. What do you think? Is that a fair way to go?
Do it.
And let's get questions all throughout. So Jared came in last minute and I'm like, Jared, no problem. I can just talk, but interrupt me with questions.
I'm going to seed some questions, but I want everyone here to drop questions in the chat, in any chat, whether you're on LinkedIn Live or an AirMeet, and I'll scoop some up and keep Isaac on his heels.
I love this. Somebody said, James, financial animation company. That I have no idea what that is, but it sounds fascinating.
Sounds very meme oriented.
Financial animation. Yeah, that's wild. B2B brand experience agency. I love it. So, all right. So quick backstory here. In 2013, I quit a great job. I was doing fundraising at a nonprofit, really enjoyed it, was working whatever hours I wanted, working remotely, making good money, believed in what I was doing. And I quit it to try to convince really smart young people to either skip college or drop out of college and do a program that I created where I would place them in apprenticeships at startups. And it was a crazy idea. But I was deeply, deeply inspired by just like my own experience in college and the inefficiency of college for most people, especially kind of like just smart generalists, the type of people who will end up in roles like you guys are in. I'm from the Midwest. When I say you guys, that's gender neutral, so can't help it. Marketing, sales, operations at tech companies, at startups, which are phenomenal jobs. Pretty much everything that happens in college is irrelevant to that job. And so I felt like this is ridiculous. I see too many smart young people just kind of languishing and going into debt for 4 or 5 years. So I launched a company called Praxis. I bootstrapped it and was able to bootstrap it up very quickly to like 120 participants per year, 1.6 million in AR, and like really made it a thing. But more than that, given how small we were, and we only had a handful of employees, we had no paid ads of any kind, almost no marketing automation. We did set up HubSpot a couple years in and did a few drips kind of badly. We had no sales team at all. But we were able to not only, grow to the in a couple years to, 1.5 million in AR, but this is like a very elite program. It's kind of like, in terms of very intense, like the Navy SEALs, only so many people are going to get it. So it's not a startup that's going to grow infinitely anyway, but our footprint was insane. I had, I think, 9 national news appearances where I was brought on news shows and interviewed. I had over 500 speaking engagements, podcast interviews. We had rabid fans everywhere, word of mouth. We had multiple best-selling books that we published. All of that was accomplished with no paid marketing, no sales team. And I kind of look back and realize like the things that made that work. I spun off a venture-backed software company in the middle of this process, like 5 years in, to try to do, something similar, but with a software tool. The TLDR there is, after 3 brutal years that literally almost physically killed me, could never get enough traction on the software product itself to be a mask. It would have worked as a bootstrap company, but not venture backed. But the media side worked really, really well. We had over 200,000 subscribers to the daily job hunt email newsletter.
And Isaac, what year was this, to give some perspective?
Yeah. So Praxis, I started in 2013, and then Crash.co, which was the platform that I raised venture for, which, by the way, like one of the best seed investors in the world, Mike Maples, came to me, cold emailed me, was like, I like what you're doing with Praxis. Again, this tiny company that I bootstrapped, it had this massively outsized impact and reach. But he came to me and was like, started talking. And so we launched Crash in late 2018, really like 2019. How to approach content strategy in the WHO economy for SaaS. Yes, we're definitely going to get into that. Was able to, it basically converted Crash into a media company after 3 years of just not getting enough traction on the product. It's called Career Hackers now. And it was acquired by somebody who's currently running it. So you might see a pattern with what I did next with PartnerHacker. And I was just looking back and thinking, and PartnerHacker is similar. So in 2022, Jared Fuller, who I've known for years, was like, hey, I know you're, looking for something to do next. You should help me come create PartnerHacker. And it's it's going to be a media company in the B2B partnership space. And I'm like, well, I've spent the last decade in like B2C working with people earlier in their careers. I don't know a lot about that space. He's like, no, but you know how to build a media company and how to create content and how to build an audience, all these things. So I said, all right, let's do it. Again, we launched PartnerHacker, basically bootstrapped. We had a few like very small strategic checks, but immediately had really big success, really big traction. And again, outsized influence, way more influence on our market than was warranted given our size. Within 9 months after launching, we got acquired by Reveal. And now I'm running PartnerHacker and the CMO of Reveal. Just 9 months after launching, brand new media company. And so I was looking back and thinking of like, what are the things that made each of these successful to the extent that they were? Praxis, I'm still on the board, but Praxis, I also exited. It's still running. So that's what I want to get into. I got seven keys, 7 takeaways, which is really about kind of organic marketing, like marketing. And this is really effective for early stage, but this is where I'm trying to bridge right now. Like, how do you apply these same tactics to a larger stage company? And that's where sort of Nearbound comes in. And we'll get to that a little bit at the end. So that was like a huge, long setup. I got to stop, take a breath, take a drink of carbonated water, because we work at startups and you have to have carbonated water. Questions, thoughts, Jared, input.
Man, how do I do this? How do I set up a media company alongside whatever we're doing?
You know what? And I think
like what's step one?
Yeah. And it's funny you say a media company, because I never would have thought of that at first, but Praxis is like this program, but Praxis was basically a media company. Our entire marketing was basically the kind of stuff you do, media and community. And so here's sort of the seven hows to I know I said we've left the how.
And as a follow-up, just get to it when you want to, with the importance and the reliance of search being diminished. Like, let's take SEO out of it. We're in the how, right? And I agree. I think AI is going to completely take the reliance off search. I was creating a manifesto today or yesterday, and I started with Google Bard, not with google.com. Times they are changing, right?
Yep. Yeah.
How do you stand out when you're creating it on the same platform that's indexed in the past by Google? How do you bridge that to the how?
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things I've noticed is you have to,
or the who. Sorry.
You have to change your, almost like your emotional resilience. So I don't know about you, but I'm sure this is true of most marketers. We need to see wins. We need some kind of feedback. Oh, my post got a lot of engagement. Oh, my landing page is getting a lot of traffic, right? Like we need to see that stuff to feel like we're doing well. Some of that is changing to where the things that are working are not always the things that are visible and easily getting measured. So you have to be kind of like emotionally resilient enough to not just keep chasing the dopamine hit stuff and to think about what's strategically working. I mean, I'll give you an example with PartnerHacker. The PartnerHacker newsletter, subscribership is not like a massive blow you away number. It's good given the niche that it's in, but we're able to drive really good blow you away number of people to register for virtual events or to download pillar content. And so it's like the impact is not necessarily measured in the place you would think it's measured, but then every once in a while you'll see indicators elsewhere where you're like, oh, everybody's talking about us here, right? We even had one of the people that sponsored an event with us. We had a tracking link for people to click on their thing, and it got like some clicks. But what they came to us and said, we looked at our gong calls and we analyzed how many people mentioned that event in the weeks following. And it was like off the charts. It was like half the calls or something. And so there's interesting things like that where like people are not clicking the link that's trackable. So you feel like you're failing, but everybody's talking about you and you're actually winning. So that's just sort of a precursor. All right. So we're going to get into seven things. And by the way, if you've never been on AirMeet before, they have these little emojis. Speaking of marketers needing feedback, I need like emoji feedback to keep my fragile ego intact. So just there, thank you. I got a laugh emoji. That's what I'm talking about. Anything. I don't even care if it's negative. It's like any press is good press, right? Like just give me something. And then I know that I'm not alone here. There we go. All right, here we go. So here are the 7 keys to the things that I built in the past and, all the way up to PartnerHacker. Number 1, have a radical point of view. And I can't stress that enough. And you may think, oh, I work at a B2B company that sells performance measurement software or something. How can I have a radical point of view? You can and you must. Always. There's always an angle. There's always a way to see your work as something radical, as something subversive, as something that is fostering creative destruction. The great phrase by economist Joseph Schumpeter, which is what's always happening in the market. It's like we're innovating, we're creating things, and they're always undermining and crumbling. What is Clayton Christensen called disruptive innovation, disrupting the status quo. And that's like, it's very romantic and idealistic, but it's true. And you have to see your own work that way. And you have to put it in a frame where you can talk to others about it in that way. Otherwise, you will just get lost in the sea of noise. You have to have a radical point of view. So for me, with the first company, it was drop out of college. And I was talking specifically to smart people. This wasn't like people who are good at college. This wasn't like hey, college isn't for everyone. You should become an electrician. This was a different point of view. This was the people who are getting scholarships to Ivy Leagues. They're wasting their time. They should drop out. They shouldn't do it. Radical point of view. But you have to stop and listen, right? Like with the next company, which is all about how to run the job hunt, our tagline was burn your resume. And we meant it. And we were just like, don't ever use a resume again. We would go lean really, really hard into that. Having a radical point of view. With PartnerHacker, it was trust is the new data. And that's like a response to the, data is the new oil. And we came out lean really, really hard that like, nope, all this data, all this how economy stuff, it's dead. Now it's all about trust. It's all about individuals, one-to-one trust, right? It's radical. It's debatable. It's not obvious. It's not obviously true. It's controversial. There are nuances. Oh, Isaac, that's too simple. If anybody ever says that the point of view you bring to the market is oversimplified, you're doing something right. Because if it's not oversimplified, then you got all these caveats and things. No one's going to give a shit. Okay, so that's the first and that's the biggest. Have a radical point of view. And that takes time, actually, if you don't have one yet. Go on a freaking soul retreat or whatever you need to tap into that and figure out what the hell am I doing and how does it put a dent in the world? And tap into that. All right, number 2. Once you have your point of view, consistent, just for me creation around your point of view. What do I mean by consistent, just for me creation? For me, it was blogging every day. Now, platforms have changed, things have changed. Maybe it's not blogging anymore. Maybe it's a TikTok video. I don't care what it is. Create something, ideally every day. If you have a different cadence, maybe it's a once a week podcast, that can work. But daily, there's something so powerful about never having a 0 day, where every single day, 7 days a week, even some days, if it's literally just like a 3-line haiku, you did something, you put something out, you created something. So I started blogging every single day, and all of my ideas about education and early career just kept coming through. And every blog post wasn't about that, but it just kept coming through over and over and over. And what happens is you build this, after a year, you have 300 some posts. Guess what I did with that? I turned around and I turned it into my first book. And then I did it again with a second book. And then I did it again, right? And now I've published 11 books now. And I've never actually sat down to write a book from cover to cover. I have written weekly newsletters. I've written daily blog posts. I've written probably close to 3,000 articles now, written or ghostwritten. And a lot of those got turned into books later. But it wasn't because I was doing it to publish a book. It wasn't because I was doing it to reach a market. I was doing it just for me. I was doing it because it changed me, because it made me better. It sharpened my thoughts and clarified things. And so I'm very, very big on this, because otherwise you'll get beat down. If you try one of these challenges, I'm going to post on LinkedIn every day, and then you don't get a lot of engagement, or you don't know if it's working. Is this even doing anything? If you're doing it because you're hoping that the market will give you a certain response, you're going to lose. You're going to get cut under. You're going to get your legs cut from under you. Do it just for you. I'm going to go out every day because I'm passionate about this radical point of view I have, and I'm going to create around it on the daily or on the weekly. You start doing that, you put in motion a machine that becomes unstoppable. Okay, number 3, especially early on. This is early on when you've got this point of view, you're trying to get it out into the market. At some point this will shift, but say yes to everything, to every opportunity to talk about your point of view. Even tiny little podcasts with weirdo guys in their mom's basement. I used to take tons of those. I would go on any podcast anyone would bring me on, because worst case, I get reps under my belt. I learn how to talk about it. I tease out my own thoughts. You ever have that experience where you don't really know what you think until someone asks you a question, and then you're forced to talk about it? You start doing podcast after podcast, Twitter spaces, anything, any chance, go to people's conferences. I used to do that stuff. I would say yes to absolutely everything. And in the early phase, again, it's so important you get that point of view honed in. And sometimes it's a benefit to get very little weird, obscure podcasts and things, because then the cost of being crappy at what you do is low, and you get to, use them as warm-ups. Okay.
Now, quick question.
Go ahead.
Can you go over your unique point of views in each of your 3 cases? Because I have a logical guess with your current one, but I'm curious as to the ones before.
Yeah. So with Praxis, it was, you're too good for college, right? Our phrase was, you're worth more than college. And the idea was that smart, ambitious young people who are generalists. So if you want to be a doctor, you want to be an accountant, and those require a degree, that makes sense. If you have no idea what you want to do, but you're smart and ambitious, you're delaying your start in your career and in the discovery process, because you're not going to find out what you want to do by taking a class about it, right? You got to go try stuff. So it was, you should drop out of college, or if you're not in college yet, if you're coming right out of high school, you should skip college and do something better, right? It wasn't don't go to college because you might not be good enough. It was no, you're way too good for college, right? And through that, all of the objections people had would surface, and then I would learn. I had talking points that just developed organically from all the conversations I was doing, all the content I was creating, the comments and all that content, all the objections people come up with. But you have to for the networking, but it's for this, it's for that. Every one of those, I understood in and out. I knew every objection in and out. Why? Because I didn't just have the point of view, but I was constantly publicly talking about it. And I was forced to refine and face the best objections. I was always taking opportunities to go talk about it anywhere someone would have me. And it really helped me hone that in to where I feel like you put me on with anybody. Back in the day, I could get on with anybody. And I'm by the end of the call, they're going to be you just set me free. I'm not going to college. Right. And, so yeah. And then with Crash, it was more about the job hunt specifically, be your own credential. Burn your resume. So we were really big on video pitches and projects. So instead of applying to a job with an application or sending a resume, sending a video that says, you open it up and it says, "Hey, Jared, I'm a huge fan of Rev Genius. I love what you guys are doing. I've been following you, attending your events. I noticed that you don't have anybody who's doing, whatever it might be, community support. So I put together this little, 30-day plan that I would do for you. If you got that, you wouldn't care about the resume at that point. You'd be like, okay, let me talk to you, right? If they send you something tangible. So that was kind of our point of view with Crash, was kind of guiding people through that. And with PartnerHacker, it's that trust is the new data, right? And that we are in an economy, as I open with, where people they don't care how good your product is and how good your information is about your product and the problems it can solve. They care who you integrate with, who trusts you, who's using you already, like you have to build a network of partners of all the people that your buyers trust in the buying process. And that's kind of the thesis. And then with Reveal, it's very much plugging that information from that network into your sales process.
Boom.
Okay. Number 4. Now this one is, I don't know. I found this to be the case. I don't know if this is always going to be the case or even if it's still the case today, but it was being the first to new platforms. So in the early days, like Facebook was everything for us. We just, without any paid stuff. Now they really changed the algorithm about 2015 or so where you had to pay to get seen. But because we were early, and I was early on Facebook, really early before that. So I'd kind of built up following, sharing stuff. Facebook absolutely was killing it. And then it started to level off because they get more sophisticated. They figure out how to monetize better. Then it was Medium. I was like one of the first people on Medium. Every article I wrote there would have like really, not a huge number, but hugely influential people. Because in the early days of Medium, it was all like VCs and like leaders at tech companies and stuff who were reading it. And it had really, really disproportionate impact. And then it just leveled off to where it was basically worthless for us. Then I was Quora. Quora just blew up. I was getting millions of impressions per, answering questions about careers, et cetera. And then Quora kind of leveled off. And I've never like tried to throw too much at the wall at once, but I've always kind of like tried to keep curious about platforms. With PartnerHacker, it's LinkedIn. I hated LinkedIn and never used it until PartnerHacker because I was all B2C and none of our audience was on LinkedIn. But now LinkedIn, it's not a new platform, but I think TikTok people have seen this with. So this is one where I'm going to say like with an asterisk, like just maintain an openness and a curiosity to go try some of these platforms. They probably won't work forever, but that's the whole point is like, if you can get the right place at the right time, like the people who were the earliest bloggers, they built their entire career around their blog because they were early, right? Twitter, Facebook, they all have this trajectory. So if you see that happening, you can try to get ahead. Okay. Your point of view, which I mentioned in number 1, your radical point of view. I'm gonna get a little more specific on that. So that point of view, you've got to boil into a narrative, and that narrative has to sound brash or even offensive to most people. You heard that right, to most people. But the people in your market, your ICP, when they hear it, it should make them say, I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. That's how you know you've hit it. When you've taken that radical point of view and you've put it into a narrative that most people will tell you is stupid and is a bad idea. But the people you care about in your market, they say, yes, I've been waiting for somebody to say that. I'm not the only one. I've always thought that. And they start sending you pictures like, look, I said this 2 years ago. That's a great sign, right? That's a great sign. That means it's connecting. It has to be something. And like the hard part as marketers is you hit that first thing where people come to you and say, this is offensive. This is stupid. This is a bad idea. I can't tell you how much I got that about the whole like, hey, don't go to college, right? Like I'm sure several of you on here are like, Isaac, that's just stupid. What a dumb idea, right? Totally okay. Program's not for you, maybe not for your kids either, but the people who it's for, they hear it and they say, I'm not crazy. I've been thinking this. They're the kind that are sitting in class being like, I feel like I'm wasting my money. This professor doesn't really know anything about the real world. I want to go out there and build stuff. And like when you hit them, they literally have like a moment. That's what your narrative has to do. Okay. Let me see. I got a couple things popping off in the chat. What are some newer?
Yeah. Was that number 5 or was that just,
that was number 5. Yes. And I know
Perfect.
it's like a more in-depth version of number 1.
When you take your narrative and it appears offensive to most people outside your ICP, but within your ICP, people feel
exactly.
seen.
Exactly. Cool. Yep. And just always ask yourself that, like when someone doesn't like it or it doesn't connect, are they the person that I need to connect with? Do I need to get it right with them? I remember when I was raising money, it was like that with investors. I'm like, if an investor doesn't get it, I don't care because my target market does and they love it. So if the investor doesn't get it, they're not the right investor for me. So it's easy to have a lot of stakeholders or people that are, but your ICP should be flipping out and loving it.
So questions, what people from Matthew?
Newer platforms.
Yeah. Asking about some of the newer platforms.
Yeah. This is where I'm like, I don't know if I'm just getting old. It's so hard for me to keep up now and to know, this isn't super newer, but I think it's tremendously underutilized. I don't see almost anybody in B2B utilizing it. Now, maybe it's because the audience for B2B just isn't there outside of maybe like super early companies and VCs. But I actually think Twitter Spaces is a very underrated thing. I really do. I wish LinkedIn would have some version of that. I think they should, because the ability to just be where people live. Like, I think this is kind of changing a little bit too, by the way. This is my hunch. So there was a phase
since
where
LinkedIn got acquired, I don't think they're going to
go ahead, Jared.
I don't see LinkedIn building it super fast, but yeah, I think they should.
No, I don't think they care too much about building a lot of stuff super fast.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was a phase where new social platforms or content platforms were like popping up all the time and kind of competing. Mm-hmm. And I could be wrong, but I feel like we're at sort of a plateau right now for that. And instead, it's more like new ways to form communities independent of platform. So when you think about living in market, like, right? And you know this, Jared, if your community is just a Slack group, well, there's a ton of those. There's too many of those now. It's like really hard to just have it rely on that. But if it's just on LinkedIn, well, that's somebody else's platform. And you're always competing with the trending post. If it's just webinars, how are you contacting people in between then? If it's just an email newsletter, right? It's kind of like all of them to a degree.
Well, now, community transcends platform.
Yes.
I'll say that.
Yep. That's it. And you don't have to own all of those things. You don't have to be like, oh, our marketing team is in 15 different places, but you have to be living in them somehow, either partnering with those who do own them or being active participants in them. And it's like, you have it, like at PartnerHacker, we know we have a community. We have a bunch of people that follow our stuff, like our stuff, and that I would say are a part of the conversation. Like, we are getting content and events and ideas from them and vice versa. It's like this mutual conversation that's happening. But if you ask me where is the PartnerHacker community? We don't have a Slack group. We have an email newsletter, the PartnerHacker Daily. We have a podcast. We do events frequently, mostly virtual. We participate in physical events that other people are hosting a lot. We're on LinkedIn a lot. We're in Slack groups like Rev Genius and participating in those. Like, I don't know where it exists. It's all over the place, but it is like a real thing that's bigger than any one platform. So, but I'd love to hear ideas of trendy new platforms that are coming out.
To this point, Isaac, you want to talk about, I don't want to go too tangential, but I'm using your first key here, have a radical point of view. The radical point of view is efficient growth is not enough. That collaborative growth, not in the reveal 1.0 type of way, but collaborative growth with the people wherever they are in your company, and having everybody as an equitable stakeholder in the success.
Yep.
You layer that on top of the profitability and stuff. Now, efficient growth is just a stopgap, Isaac. That's the radical point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And that efficient growth will dry up if you're not participating. Like, we call it live in market. Like, if you're not living in the market in all of these ways, which ties really nicely into point.
See, I'm working on this radical point of view right now, if you can't tell.
How important is it to build a community around your point of view narrative? Yeah. So I'm so glad you asked that, Chris. It's everything. And I didn't used to use the word community because I thought of communities back then when I was starting Praxis and Crash as like only in terms of a formal group that you join. But what I found was we had a community. Every time we would go anywhere, I'd say, oh, I'm going to be speaking at this event. Tons of people would be like, oh, I want to be there. I want to show up. There were like fans, like customers, advocates, all these people. They were part of a community. The way that I have always found success with community is content first, because that's just who I am. I love to write. I love to create content. So you take the radical point of view, create content consistently around it, say yes to all those opportunities to talk about it. And then a community kind of forms. And for me, and then it was like, well, now what do we do with this community? Do we formalize it in some sense? Do we create, specific events or places for people to engage, or use platforms like Slack? That always came next. I have seen people do it the opposite direction effectively. That's harder for me, but I have seen people start with a community around some kind of shared point of view and then have content that sort of spins out of that. I think both can work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But for me, it was like content first. Like I just need to talk my way through this point of view. And so numbers 6 and 7 are really going to hit. They're really going to connect the dots here. So number 6, attract and hire only live-in market creators for every role. Now that might sound wacky and like aspirational, but I did it even for like nerdy data types, programmy types, operational types, behind the scene types that aren't facing customers. Even for those roles, I only hired live-in market creators, people who lived in market and who had consistent creation. In fact, we had a requirement. You had to blog every single day for 30 days on just on your personal blog. It didn't have to be about company stuff, but I wanted people on the team who were so engaged in the thinking process and the creating process, and that they were out there living in the market all the time. And what this did is it made us unstoppable in terms of our reach. When we had a team of 2, when we had a team of 3, 6, 15, at each of those stages, our footprint was just massive because every member of that team was constantly creating. They were all living in the market. We were so closely connected with the market, and we were just creating all the time and putting things out there into the world, not all under the company brand, most of it under the individual people's names, their personal blogs, their personal social followings. Not all of it was related to work, but a lot of it was, because when you're doing that consistently, a lot of that will come out. So we had this network that was so much more influential than just the official company and its official marketing. And all of you have seen this on LinkedIn. I mean, even just the way that LinkedIn will throttle, company posts versus individual posts when you have a company culture like that. So, I tried to hire for that, but I also attracted that because every single day I was blogging, posting on social, doing podcasts, and I was talking about this philosophy. I was talking about don't be a critic, be a creator. I was talking about taking the daily blog challenge. And so because I was so loud about it, I attracted people to my orbit who were motivated by that. And then I would get messages from people that, hey, I took your 30-day blogging challenge and it changed my life. Now I started doing this, this, and this. I'd say, oh, really? Are you looking for a job? Then a conversation would start because I had this pool to draw from because all these people coalesced around these radical ideas about taking charge of your life and career, not waiting for someone to bestow status and credentials on you, creating your way into new roles, all these different things that had spun out of this point of view that we had attracted people to them. And you've seen that with PartnerHacker as well. And we're talking about like the first giver advantage and like partner-led everything and like getting these radical points of view out there, creating content around them. Now there's this network to draw from. If somebody said, Isaac, who should I go to for, whatever, tech partnerships, content about whatever, I would have a bunch of people to draw from because there's this orbit that's been created around that center of gravity, which is the point of view, and attracting people who are going to be the types that continue to create and live in market. Okay, which brings me to the last one. Yeah, maybe it should be number 1, but I feel like you have to have a radical point of view around which that constant creation evolves, because I have seen something happen. People kind of get this. They're like, oh, you need engagement, you need social. So I'll just like become an influencer. And they're just like a generic influencer without a point of view. And it's like, well, maybe you figured out how to game the algo and get impressions, but what are you all about? When you think about a good test is if someone's hosting a conference. I used to run into people that say, I want to be a public speaker. I'm like, well, what do you want to speak about? I don't know. I just want to be a public speaker. And I'm like, well, I've never met a conference organizer who's like, you know what I need? A speaker. Just to talk about something.
Business.
Right? It's like, they're like, we need a session that talks about AI. Who's the person that's going to do the best job talking about AI? Oh yeah, that one person. I keep seeing them. They're always talking about it, right? You need to have something, and this can change over time. This doesn't have to be your whole identity, but you need to have a point of view that resonates, I think, before you can start creating and find a way to get a point of view during the process. Don't wait to start creating. But I think for the business component, you got to be saying something. Okay. Final one. This is what makes all this easier. Always learn out loud. Always learn out loud. Because you'll hear all these other things I've said and you'll feel all this pressure. I have to have this amazing radical point of view. I got to be writing and putting content out about it all the time, going on podcasts, jumping on every new platform, having this narrative that connects with everybody, attracting people that does the same thing. You feel like you have to be like an expert and you have to have all kinds of authority, but you really don't. If you just learn out loud, if you just are willing to learn out loud, your market should feel like they are on the journey with you. Hey, I'm trying to figure out, here's my point of view, and I'm trying to figure out how to make this happen, how to bring this about, how to put that dent in the world. And I'm learning it out loud with you. And you see some of the most interesting stuff that you'll see on any social platform are people being like, hey, take a look at this. We had this feeling that something was wrong with our product onboarding process. So we did this, here were the results. And they're just sharing, they're learning out loud. They're not coming to you like an expert. If you think you think about the way humans learn in general, we learn better from those who are only a little bit ahead of where we currently are than from those who are the gurus. I look at my kids. If I try to teach my kids something, they have a much harder time learning it than if their older sibling tries to teach them, because their older sibling is only a little bit removed from that novice spot. If I go on YouTube and I want to know how to do something with my car and I'm not very mechanically minded, if I run into some expert mechanic and they start talking a bunch of gibberish that I don't understand, it'll be over my head. But if I run into some guy that says, hey, I was trying to figure out how to change the spark plugs, this is what I learned, let me show you, that's probably actually going to connect better. So it has this weird benefit. People gain trust with you. You're approachable and humble, takes the pressure off of you from knowing everything. And other people who are in a similar place, they actually learn more from you if you're learning out loud along with them. I think that's one of the greatest superpowers for a great content machine, personally, or for your company, is just the willingness to learn out loud and to not present yourself as the expert. There are times where you will be the expert and lean into that, but most of the time you won't. And that doesn't prohibit you from living in market and talking about it. Okay. So that's kind of like the 7 keys to like, if you have no budget, if you have no, fancy tools and all this stuff, can you still make a dent and capture the market? And even if you have a budget and all these things, think of this as your foundation. Think of this as your starting point. Those seven keys. So, that's what helped me build a bootstrap company and then launch a venture-backed company where the product didn't actually ever get traction and take off. And I learned out loud through that whole process. I actually wrote a book called The Inner Game of Startups about the craziness of going through that process. And then launching PartnerHacker. And now what I've seen being in this B2B space a little bit more, there's something really interesting here. If you take those tactics that I just mentioned, those 7 tactics, and then you add actual teams, actual budget, you can scale those principles beyond just yourself or a few marketers. And you can turn it into a growth lever for the entire company. Those principles of really the who economy. And the way you do that is you do all of these things yourself and as a marketing team, and you're constantly showing love to other people, right? Like making others famous in the process. You're talking about things that others are doing, things that people who are in the market that your buyers trust. You are showing love to essentially partners, people your buyers trust in the market. You're living in the market. And then you're bringing 3 things from all of those relationships into your sales process at your company. You're bringing intel, intros, and influence, right? You're bringing those into the sales process. So then you're saying, hey, I've been out here doing all these newsletters and all this stuff, going on podcasts. And I just talked to this person. There was someone in the chat who is at this company and they're one of our target accounts. Let me go talk to the sales team, right? Let me pull in something that I have built through kind of this process of go to market. What Mark Killens is calling something like this, people first go to market, right? Where it's like building community through content and all this type of stuff. But you can do this at a scale that far exceeds just like you and your market team if you're able to bring the intel and the information. And that's what we call a near-bound strategy, right? You have outbound, inbound, and near-bound. And near-bound is where you're taking the information, the relationships that your buyers have with people that you partner with, and you're pulling in to the sales process for Intel intros and influence. And that's kind of like the next evolution of like where I am now, is realizing, oh, all this stuff that I was doing, very hands-on, very bootstrappy, very just like intuitively, this stuff works incredibly well in B2B for one, but two, this can actually plug in to a real system with a larger company that has a sophisticated sales process and ops and automation, and you can plug it in and you can make this scale. Because the problem with all those things I just listed is, I told you I dialed in my point of view and my narrative so well, I could get on a call with anybody and convince them. But I could only, me and maybe those handful of radicals that I attracted to work with me, we could all do that. But we couldn't do that at a scale across a company of hundreds or thousands of people just by following those 7 things. What you have to do is take the influence and the relationships developed by doing those 7 things and somehow plug that in to the processes that your company is using, specifically in sales, but in sales and marketing, and be able to then tap into that trust that's been built in the market and leverage it at scale. And that's kind of the next evolution. And that's what we at Reveal, we call nearbound, because Reveal helps you basically see account overlaps with your partners, pull that into the sales process so that salespeople can kind of like tap into those relationships for Intel intros and influence. So that's kind of like my own way of trying to, I always feel like self-narratization is a really important skill. You always have to be able to say, where am I in my own journey? And how does where I am now connect to where I used to be? And that's kind of my way of seeing the connecting thread of like, okay, here are these things I did and the way that I did them. And now I'm here in a very different space, but there's something that's the same. And I'm trying to figure out how to like scale this and systematize those same core ideas and elements. And that's sort of where I am. So this is me learning out loud. That's how I see it right now, but who knows, maybe I'll change in a year.
Isaac, this is spectacular. I copied all these and threw it in our company Slack. I don't know. I hope others are doing that as well. The 7 takeaways are spectacular. My question is, you have your point of view as a company. You have a team of a dozen or more early stage folks that are all building their personal brands, all doing this. How are they carrying the company's unique point of view into their personal brands? Or is that being forced? Are you letting them just go off? How can you create a unified front when everybody is doing what everybody wants to build what everybody wants?
I'll tell you the easy way. The easy way is if you start from scratch and you get to build the team from the beginning. So then everyone that you attract and hire, you already know that they're excited about that. But that's rarely possible, right? You do that if you literally start a company from the beginning, or maybe a department from the beginning. And you know that you're attracting that type of person, and you know that you have confidence that like the reason they want to work here is because they're passionate about that point of view. And so I would always just tell people, I don't care what, like whatever you talk about, whatever you create, go on podcasts about kayaking for all I care, be out there in the market, because that other stuff is going to come through, because I know you live and breathe it just like I do. Now, maybe not to the same extent as the founder, but it's there. It's different when so coming over to Reveal and being the CMO, you have a larger company, you've got a team that pre-exists you. And so if that hasn't been habituated, then there's got to be some ways to, like, it's a process of trying to slowly get that going. So I think the biggest thing as a leader is example. If you're doing it all the time, not only externally, so you're learning out loud, you're creating content, you're sharing that point of view, but internally, you're doing it with your team, and you're also celebrating it when people on the team do it. Because culture is the combination of what's tolerated and what's celebrated, right? So when you see somebody out there living in market and talking about things and, in their own way, talking about the things that core point of view of the company, internally being like, hey, this was awesome. Check out, this person was over here. Oh, I noticed this person engaging in this Slack thread in this community, and making sure to reinforce that. So leading by example and then reinforcing it through, sort of celebrating it internally. And then finally, as you have talent that shifts, again, attracting, like, part of your hiring process. I always do the anti-sale when I'm interviewing for any role. I always say, okay, great. We learned about each other. I heard about your skills and all this stuff. I had you tell me your impression of this job and this role. Now I'm going to tell you why you're the wrong person for this job, and why you're going to hate it, and why your life is going to suck, and you're going to wish you didn't take the job. And I give them, it's like that Ernst Shackleton ad, men wanted, perilous journey, bitter cold, long nights, chance of death, glorious riches upon success. I don't even know if that's a true ad. It might be apocryphal, but it's like the greatest job application ever. I kind of try to do that. And then I see what they come back with. And if they sort of walk away dejected and like, man, that guy's kind of an asshole. Why would I want to work for that? Great. If they're like, no, that motivates me, right? That tells me they're excited enough by that core radical point of view that they're not going to be able to help letting it bleed out of them. And then it's going to come out. And I try to hire people that are like that and where you can give as much freedom as possible. And I think the line between your personal brand and your company brand, I don't think it's as important as it used to be. If you hire an employee that just like people love them and they're great at putting out content and living in community and they're trusted by a lot of people, they'll bring a lot of that with them, even if a lot of it's not entirely based on the product that you're selling. So I'm not too strict about it, but there are limits for sure. If your people are just like out there posting dating advice all the time and running dating advice podcast and you're trying to sell, project management software, I mean, maybe there's a way to make those things work together, but there might be limits.
I think the key is finding people that are obsessed with the problem that you solve.
Yep.
Because if they're obsessed with it, no matter what they post off, like, I posted a picture of me with my nephew today, and I'm like, my personal community, right? Because like I'm obsessed with community, and you're gonna just bring the tangents back all the time.
And this is where the point of view has to be high level enough to where it can connect to so many things. I mean, everybody's heard the analogy, of the worker who's like, what are you doing? Oh, I'm laying bricks. And then the other worker that's, smiling and whistling. What are you doing? I'm building a cathedral, right? They have this vision of something that's bigger. And so that point of view, if it's something big, like you said, building community, right? Like the future is in community or something, that's a big vision that connects to so much stuff. When I was doing the praxis thing, the way people learn, the way careers are started, the way you take charge of your personal life and career and growth. Those are very big, high level things. So almost anything I was doing or writing or talk about could connect to them in a way that was like real and genuine. So I think that is a great point you bring up though. Because if you're like trying to get your team, hey, I want you all to create content about how to, more efficient, like let's say reveal. If I'm like, okay, team, every single person needs to be daily in the market talking about account mapping. Like who the hell is going to do that? Right. And who's going to follow that? Right. It's like, no, we're talking about something bigger. We're talking about, we've moved from the how economy to the who economy, and people are what matter and connections are what matter. This is why you need to be connected with those your buyers trust. Those themes can be woven into a lot of stuff without much difficulty. And people who get excited by them will do that naturally.
This has been an awesome conversation, man. Everybody's pinging in here. Simona, thanks for the props. I realized there's a limit of how many words or characters you could put in each one. So I added all the takeaways in 3 different
good
things here.
I
was looking to the right. I'm like, why is it not working? I'm like, oh, this is probably
why. So I know I talked like 80% of the time. I don't even want to see.
Let's open it up to see if any more questions come in. Any closing questions?
Yeah, and hit us with some emojis if you're still awake. There we go.
There we go. It's not.
My heart was not beating for several seconds there. Okay, it's good.
Now I'm hitting it with a few.
Yeah, we kept a few people around. Yeah. Any final questions? And if you want to hit me up anytime, you can connect me on LinkedIn, or you can just shoot me Isaac@PartnerHacker.com. I'm in RevG
or
as
chat partnerships. Just drop all the questions in chat partnerships, and this is how the collaboration continues.
Yeah.
Throughout, and you want to meet one of the most dedicated teams out of any team. It's this PartnerHacker team, top to bottom. They bleed working together with others, and they're kind. And they're sturdy in their point of view at the same time. And it's pretty wonderful to watch.
I love that you said sturdy in your point of view. Hey, I'll end on this that you mentioned. I'm glad you gave a shout out because the PartnerHacker team is amazing. Here's how these things
and reveal.
And the reveal team as well. Absolutely incredible. And here's how these things compound over time. A bootstrap B2C company, then a venture-backed B2C company that was doing a little bit on the B2B side, and then a media company in B2B, and then a software. What are the connecting threads, and how can you take with you the things that you do well across different domains, dimensions, companies? The PartnerHacker team, the majority of those are either alumni who went through the Praxis program or people who followed myself or Jared through all that content creation over the years. So like they're pre-screened for mindset and all this stuff because it's about creating an orbit. Like the center.
You've been brainwashing them for years.
What? Absolutely. I always have a farm team, dude. Always. I'm always the types of people that enter your orbit and say, hey, I'm down with this. I like this point of view. Like you will see that and you will take it with you across multiple jobs, multiple opportunities. Jared loves to say play long-term games with long-term people. And I'm always thinking about that. Like, okay, if I were to go start a new company, who would be the first 5 people I hire? Who would be the first 10 people I hire?
I could guess, and I'd probably be right on 80% of them.
Yep, absolutely. And everybody should have that running. And then you ask yourself, if I don't have any, why not? I must not be loud enough in the market. I must not be living in market enough to where people would say, I would go work with that girl, or I would go work with that guy anytime they started something new. There should be a handful of people that would drop anything at the chance to go build something with you. And that's a good test for yourself if you're out there living in the market enough. Oh, here we go. We got a question.
Any tips for brainwashing teams that are not aligned? I love it.
The nearbound brain. Yes, we call it the partner pill, giving people the partner pill. Look, nothing speaks louder than results, than revenue that you can drive. So I always used to, this is funny, this is very relevant. I always used to tell people in the job market when I was running Crash that there's only 2 things that matter in the job market: your ability to create value and your ability to prove it. You got to have both of them. If you can't create value, but you're really good at, proving it, making it look like you can, you might get opportunities, but then you'll burn bridges and you'll be done. If you're great at creating value, but you're terrible at proving it, you won't get opportunities. You'll be an underutilized asset all the time. Okay. So those same 2 things are true here for getting people bought into a nearbound strategy. The nearbound strategy has to be creating value and you have to be able to prove it. So can you find ways to pull in intel, intros, and influence from partners or others in your network, get those into deals with AEs or whomever is involved or in marketing to help push them, to help get them to close? And if that's already happening, can you literally put together a deck, put in screenshots, because sometimes the attribution and the raw numbers aren't there, or they're hard to track because it's like nobody really knows the buyer's journey of today. It's like, you know that your AE is working a customer. Then you were on a webinar and that customer was there. And then afterwards you had a conversation with them. And then they talked to you about, something else. And and you know that this helped influence that deal, but it's not going to show up in attribution. Can you at least put together a deck and be like, look, here's what's happening. Here's people our buyers trust. Here's the way that, we're partnering with some of them. Here's an example where I went and got intel or an intro or influence. Here's what eventually happened with that deal. This didn't show up in attribution, but this shit is real. It's happening right now, and we can actually scale this and systematize this. Let's push this information to the AEs at the right time for the right accounts so that we can make sure we're tapping into trust that already exists in our ecosystem. I think you can make that case with some examples and build a narrative around it. But I would love to geek out with you on that if you want to hit me up in the chat. And some people on the Reveal team will have some great ideas as well.
We should petition Adriana to allow us to throw a round table on this, just like casual Zoom call, like everybody has equity speaking around in a circle to just like help everyone lift.
Yeah, that's absolutely love it. Yep. So we'll end it here since we have 1 minute.
No
left,
need to petition.
I got to tell you, who asked the question? Is there a written summary coming? Wayne, I actually, in jotting down some bullets for this, I usually don't have so many bullets. I just kind of go conversationally. I realized I got to put together like a slide deck or something, some kind of written summary. So it's something I need to do at some point.
Isaac, what we're going to try to do? I'm going to talk to Joanna, our head of owned media, about transcribing this whole webinar, taking out some of the fluff and just creating a nice article for everyone to read.
I love it. I love it.
I think there's so much good stuff here.
Hassan at Data Lab, there is a book coming out probably Q4-ish. The Nearbound book. It is in production right now. So,
oh
teaser,
my gosh,
teaser. You guys are the first to hear the teaser here. Maybe it's mentioned
teaser.
somewhere else, but yeah.
In,
Hey,
in
this
two
has been
Fridays,
so much
in 2
fun.
Fridays, we'll be hanging with reveal to un-asterisk our funnel as well. So be out for that too.
Yes,
I want to
so
be conscious for time,
that.
but I have to plug Rev Genius and Reveal's partnership. We are so hype. Jared and Jared are. There's a little picture of me floating around looking like baby Jesus. Are going to be having a great time helping people leverage partnerships and sales.
Hey, this is going to be amazing. And you should definitely try to get on the show or get somebody who's like an 8-year company, get on the show. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be like equal parts entertaining reality TV and like hard hitting, legit insight to help with your sales and marketing funnel. So really, really looking forward to that. So check it out. Unbleep your funnel coming up soon.
All right. You don't have to go home, but we hit the end of here. Thank you all for coming. Isaac, thank you for being our guest. This has been a tremendous episode.